Let's talk about what it all means with our political panel. Matthew Continetti, editor-in-chief of the Washington Free Beacon, and Shira Center, political editor for the Boston Globe. Welcome to both of you, and happy Friday. Shira, let's start with you. What do these numbers mean for Donald Trump, especially when it comes to the female vote?
Yeah, so they don't mean good things for Donald Trump, in short, for the female vote. Although in the Republican Party, men do tend to outnumber women by a lot. When you're talking about a 10-point gap in the polls, I mean, that's big. And that is because he's not doing well with female voters. He's not doing well with female voters across the board. And he's not doing well, especially with female voters within the Republican Party. And that's what these numbers show. And that's why you see Ted Cruz really trying to capitalize on that. He's holding events in Wisconsin, headlined by his wife, headlined by Carly Fiorina, the former presidential candidate who has now endorsed him. He's really making a play in a unique way for the female vote in Wisconsin.
But, Matthew, Donald Trump has been in the headlines for, I don't know, 3 decades maybe. He had a TV show for 20 years. I think people think they know him, don't they? Don't they already? Isn't he already sort of defined in the public imagination?
He's certainly, identified. He has great name recognition, the best of anybody running, probably. But this is the moment in the campaign where the candidates are defined, and you really start thinking, who do I want to be president? And so Donald Trump has had a very bad 2 weeks. He's had this fight with Ted Cruz over the wives. He's had issues, misstatements about abortion, about nuclear weapons. And so he's been an unwitting ally to Ted Cruz. And Ted Cruz has some other allies in Wisconsin. He has the talk radio community who are pretty anti-Trump, and he's got Governor Scott Walker, who has these sky-high approval ratings and who really is the linchpin of the Republican Party in Wisconsin. So Walker, the talkers, and Donald Trump are all helping Ted Cruz this coming Tuesday.
Well, Cruz has said, Shira, that he wants to stop Donald Trump. He plans to be the nominee. A lot of people have been kind of clucking and saying not possible at this point. Is it?
I mean, look, if there's one thing this election has taught us, it's anything is possible. Look who the Republican frontrunner is. I think what a win in Wisconsin would do for Ted Cruz is it would create even more momentum for his campaign. Let's remember that the timing for this Wisconsin primary is so definitive in the Republican primary because it's really in between a lot of space on the calendar. Republicans haven't had a primary for a couple weeks. After this, they won't have a primary until New York. So whoever wins the Wisconsin primary is going to get a whole lot of momentum going into the next few weeks, going into New York. Now, what does that really mean? That means, in terms of a delegate count, not a whole lot. But if Ted Cruz can use this win to kind of slow down Donald Trump's momentum as a whole, it could, and I still think maybe 50% chance at most this is the case, still think that it could prevent Donald Trump from getting the necessary delegates he needs before the convention, in which case we'd be going to a contested convention.
And Matthew, in a second I want to drill down a little more into the numbers, but before we do that, I want to ask you this question. Donald Trump says, look, I am bringing all kinds of new people into the Republican Party. I'm bringing in, blue-collar Democrats. All kinds of folks who would never think to have voted Republican before are voting for me. Could he overcome some of the negatives by, bringing in new voters?
It's hard to do that, John, because the fact is for all of the disaffected voters Trump is bringing into the process, he's alienating traditional conservative and Republican voters who are saying they don't want to see him as the nominee, and that number has been rising over the past few weeks. I think Wisconsin's fascinating. It's kind of like a New Hampshire, too. It has the potential to reset the primaries in both the Republican and Democratic contests, and each of the candidates have a different strategy going toward this election. Trump wants the first ballot, right? He wants to have that 1237 delegates so he can win on the first ballot. Ted Cruz has the second ballot strategy. He wants to stop Trump from getting 1237 so he can win on the second ballot. And Kasich has a third ballot strategy. He wants to somehow block both Trump and Ted Cruz and be the consensus candidate when the convention can't make up all their minds. I think Cruz's strategy is probably the smartest of those three.
I want to show those numbers now, Shira, that I was talking about a moment ago. Fox Business Network poll asked likely Wisconsin primary voters, who do you like in a head-to-head matchup between Clinton and Trump? Hillary Clinton leads 49 to 35%, 14 percentage points ahead there. That, at least in that one state, kind of shoots down his argument that he's going to wallop Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, Donald Trump says a whole lot of people like him who really don't. He says Latinos love him, poll numbers show they don't. He says women love him, poll numbers show they don't. So I wouldn't exactly, in my business, consider Donald Trump a credible source on his own likability, okay? He's pretty biased in that way. But, you know, look, those poll numbers, I think poll numbers this early of a general election campaign, especially given the current investigation into Hillary Clinton's email practices, I think those numbers, I think it's a little hard to say, but, I mean, the fact that Donald Trump, the number I look at in polls is just the high number of unfavorable overall that Donald Trump has among a general electorate population. Let's remember in this primary process that Donald Trump, with the one exception of a primary, has actually not gotten the majority of a primary vote in any state. You're still talking about a segment of the Republican population, not even the majority of the Republican Party, who stands by and supports Donald Trump.
And we could get a reset, Matthew, as you say. I mean, this is the first real primary test in a month or so.
Right, and remember, the polls right now have Trump doing pretty well in New York, which is the next contest following Wisconsin. But there's a break. There's about a a 2-week break between Wisconsin and New York. So if you have momentum from Cruz coming out of Wisconsin, and then you just add to the negative headlines that Donald Trump has been experiencing in recent weeks, you could see Trump's numbers in New York fall. Now, he'll probably still win New York, but if you keep him to under 50%, he's denied a lot of delegates, and that makes the different ballot strategies I talked about for the other candidates all the more stronger.
Matthew Continetti from the Washington Free Beacon, Shira Center from the Boston Globe. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.